the ROI on incremental revenue for Bing is significantly higher than Google.
Hi there and welcome to From Ideas to Results. I'm joined by Chris, part of our data team here at Sleeping Giant Media, and we're going to dive into all the things that have been happening in the world of data in the last 30 days. So one of the things that you've been looking at is Meridian Modelling. I know this has been something that I think I signed up to it like 6 months ago, or sort of a long time ago. It's now out and it's happening. Can you give us an intro as to kind of what it is and what we can use it for?
So Meridian Modelling is essentially mixed marketing modelling using Google's proprietary data and your own data. So you can feed your data in and Google will run a number of different types of analysis. It will do some either geographic or user-based testing. So you don't actually have to run the specific tests. You put the data in and it will use those different geographic areas to say, I'll use this as a control, I'll use that as a test and that as a variant, and see what happens in those different situations as impressions, whatever input you've given.
How easy is it to use? Is this something that's accessible to the wider market or skill sets required?
More accessible than running your own modeling, but it does take some development skills. So it will be helpful to have some form of Python. It will be useful to have some kind of data extractor to be able to get that data. And depending on how granular you get, you might even need to invest in tools like BigQuery. And you can very quickly get to a point where if you're looking at every campaign and every geographic area across 300 days, that is many millions of rows that something like Excel or Google Sheets will start to struggle with.
So what have we been kind of using it for so far, and what sort of implications have you noticed with it?
Main things that it's there to do is to say these two different platforms, or these multiple different platforms, how do they compare against each other in terms of incremental revenue? The other thing it does is it tries to have a look at the response curves for, based off of investment, the more or less you invest, are you getting more or less back? And then it will give you a response curve and say, this is the response curve, this is where you're currently at on your budget. You can give it two different inputs, one which is tell me what I could have got with my existing budget and tell me what my budget could have been in order to get more, and it will say this is where you sit on the response curve, and actually if you'd have moved the budget from here to here, you would have got this much extra incremental revenue. With really two key outputs that we've been using is, one, what is the incremental revenue for two different channels, and what is the ROI of that incremental revenue in two different channels.
And does it consider the implication of each of those channels on one another? So for example, because you were mentioning, I think, AdWords, or running Google and being alongside it, does it consider the fact that there is implication potentially with one on the other, or is it independent?
It should do. So it tries to create a control group, which is a control group that hasn't had interaction with either. And the variants are ones that have only had their own, but it doesn't know everything.
And what have you seen so far? I think you mentioned Bing's being pretty positive sort of response in terms of...
It has. So in terms of the size of the market for Bing and how much people tend to invest in it, tends to be a small part of that overall marketing mix for paid, but actually its incremental revenue is really significant. All of the accounts that we've checked that have both of them, actually the ROI on incremental revenue for Bing is significantly higher than Google. The response curve also tails off very quickly. It's not that it has endless amounts of volume like Google does, but the response you get for your spend is very high.
So Meridian as a tool, it's been really useful to evaluate those channels, but also it sounds like really good from a planning perspective as well, to enable brands, businesses to then say, actually, what if I spent this? What's the likely return for that as well?
To be clear, it's not a forecasting tool.
No.
So it is a looking back at what happened, but that's a really great way of saying, was this efficient? You can make the assessment of, is this a market that's about to completely change?
So in terms of kind of like next steps for people out there considering sort of doing more with their data, is it a tool that you'd recommend? And again, I guess where would they start to get involved with this?
So it is a great tool. You have to give it a few sets of data, which are impressions or clicks or cost by geographic area, and that's really what you're putting in, and it does the rest.
Some exciting stuff happening in the world of data there. Sounds like a really good tool to kind of get involved with. If you found that useful, do check out our website, check out our blogs and our social channels for more content, and we'll see you next time.